You've described so effectively how China has become a world now of individual ambition and great expectations. My question is, what happens when inevitably disappointment sets in? How will the Chinese handle disappointment? What manifestation of it do you expect?
You know, this is the essential question these days. There is this very sort of brittle sense of stability in China. You have the feeling that it's stable as long as the status quo can obtain, and the underlying conditions are changing so fast that the economic status quo is not going to obtain. And then the question becomes, well, how does the political establishment respond when inevitably there will be an expression of discontent? Just to put it in perspective, by the way, there are now in China on average 180,000 acts of civil unrest every year. That's 500 a day somewhere in the country, and oftentimes the complaints are about environmental pollution or land grabs or corruption. Oftentimes people wonder, we're now 25 years after Tiananmen, is there going to be another Tiananmen Square? My own sense is that it wouldn't be another Tiananmen Square because they had one. That's the kind of risk they know how to address. The Chinese government has oriented itself precisely to prevent that kind of action from happening again. What's harder for them to anticipate and respond to is what happens when you have farmers in one area whose crops are unusable because of environmental pollution, and they discover that in fact farmers in another area have the same complaint, and they start to coordinate, and they coordinate by text, and they coordinate by Weibo, which is the Chinese Twitter. Up until now, the Chinese government solution has been that you pay the leadership of the demonstrations to stand down, you co-opt them in some form or another, and then you arrest some people. So it's a sort of carrot and stick. But there will be a moment when, and this is the key fact, when the middle class decides that the risk to its own health and the risk to its property, for instance, from corruption or from absence of rule of law, is a risk to what they've accumulated. So far, they have more to gain by staying invested in the system than they have by challenging it. But that is a balancing act, and it's not static, and we've seen it changing. This is one of the reasons Xi Jinping, I should say, has made more visits to the military in the first 2 years he's been in power, 18 months, than his predecessor did in 10 years. And this is because he is adamant about maintaining civilian control over the military. So, you know, would they open fire? This is the big question. Would they open fire on a demonstration? They're still wounded by the experience of 1989. It eroded their credibility in a way that was very hard for them to rebuild. And the way they rebuilt it was with prosperity, but that prosperity is not going to be available to them again. So Xi Jinping would have a very tough decision on his hands, I think.